Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Functional Longevity Podcast, where we give you insight on how to get fit, feel younger, live better. I'm your host, Chris Borda, best-selling author and owner of Y.E.S Fitness. And let me first thank you for taking time from your busy day to listen to what I have to say. Before I go any further, let me also thank Y.E.S Fitness, our sponsor. Most people lose the ability to enjoy life as they age. At Y.E.S Fitness, we help people age 40 plus get fit so they can live longer and enjoy those extra years doing the things they love to do. A little bit of housekeeping here. If you'd like to get a timestamp or a transcript of today's broadcast, head on over to yesfitnessct.com. Across the top, you'll see a button that says podcast. Click on that, and it will now give you access to any one of our 385 episodes. You can also get this broadcast wherever podcasts can be found. Boost your longevity with particular supplements. If you're training, eating well, and still dealing with low energy, brain fog, or stubborn blood sugar issues, that's unusual. And it's usually not a motivation problem. It's a cellular one. As we age, mitochondrial function slows, metabolic control slips, and recovery takes longer. That's why I use Particular. Their NNM supports cellular energy production. Resveratrol helps protect heart and brain health. And berberine improves blood sugar control and metabolic function, all critical for healthy aging after 40. These are clean, science-based, backed supplements made right here in the USA. And I've personally noticed better energy, focus, and recovery. If you want your body to respond again, visit particular.com. That's PARTIQLAR.com. And use the code YES15 for 15% off. The new dietary guidelines through a longevity lens. We have a weight problem in the United States, but it's not just a weight problem. It's a metabolic problem. It's a food environment problem. And honestly, it's a longevity problem. Right now, about 72% of U.S. adults are overweight. 41% meet the criteria for obesity. 14% have diabetes, and 43% have prediabetes. And that last number matters more than most people realize, because emerging evidence shows prediabetes isn't just a warning sign. It has real clinical consequences of its own. And it's not just adults. Over a third of American adolescents are overweight. 1 in 5 is obese. That is sad. Layer on top of that the fact that U.S. life expectancy is 3.6 years lower than any other high-income countries. And our health-adjusted life expectancy, how long we live without chronic disease, is almost 5 years behind. That gap isn't genetics. It isn't laziness. It isn't a lack of information. It's the food. Which brings me to something genuinely surprising. For the first time in a long time, the new dietary guidelines for Americans actually get the big idea right. And the thesis is refreshingly simple. Eat real food. That's it. Been saying it for a long time. People come into the gym. What should I do? Eat real food at its most natural state. And that may not sound revolutionary, but in a food system dominated by ultra-processed, hyper-engineered products, it's a better, pretty bold statement. Today, I want to talk to you, though, where I think these guidelines nailed it. Where I push harder, and most importantly, what the science actually says beneath the guidelines. Protein finally gets the upgrade it deserves. One of the biggest and most important shifts in the guidelines is protein. And my take on protein has changed over the years as well. They now recommend 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, up from the old 0.8 grams per kilogram. That old number was never meant to be optimal. It was a deficiency prevention floor, not a health target. Protein is now framed the right way. something to prioritize at every meal. Using high quality sources from both animal and plant foods, eggs, poultry, seafood, dairy, red meat in moderation, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, and soy. They also make an important distinction about good food. Avoid deep fried foods, avoid meats loaded with sugars and refined starches, and minimize chemical activities. Pretty simple to understand that, right? My take, I'm fully on board with this upgrade. Protein does a lot of heavy lifting for functional longevity. It supports muscle mass, metabolic health, glucose regulation, bone density, immune function, and critically, satiety. If anything, I'd make the guidance more practical. Distribute protein across 2 to 3 meals, not one giant dinner. Recognize that protein needs rise with age. Older adults experience anabolic resistance, meaning it takes more protein per meal, often 30 to 40 grams, to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Prioritize whole food protein sources most of the time. Powders can help, but they shouldn't be the foundation. And let's clear something up. Meat isn't the protein. Processed meat is. Pardon me. Meat isn't the problem. Processed meat is. Those are chemically different foods. Nitrates, additives, refined carbs, they don't belong in the same category as a piece of steak or chicken. The guidelines quietly acknowledge this, and I'm glad they did. Whole grains and case for fiber. The new guidelines don't obsess over carbs. They obsess over carb quality. That's a smart move. They recommended 2 to 4 servings per day of fiber-rich whole grains and strongly urge people to reduce refined grains, white bread, crackers, packaged cereals, tortilla chips. This matters because most carb calories in the United States come from low-quality refined sources, and those are consistently linked with worse health outcomes. My lens on this is fiber. Whole grains aren't magical because they're whole. They're useful because they just deliver fiber, one of the most underconsumed and high-impact nutrients of the modern diet. Most people should aim for at least 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day, often more. Fiber supports gut health, improves satiety, stabilizes blood sugar, and consistently associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, and early mortality. Refined carbs are the opposite. They're the structure of grain and the benefits removed. They digest fast, spike glucose, and act like sugar in disguise. And fiber doesn't have to come from wheat. Oats, quinoa, buckwheat, legumes, nuts, seeds, and vegetables all count. Not everybody tolerates every grain, and that's okay. Fiber is a target, not a specific food. Fruits and longevities are the longevity foods. Pardon me, fruits and vegetables are the longevity foods. The guidelines recommend 3 servings of vegetables and 2 servings of fruit per day. I agree, but I'd frame that as a minimal, not a goal. Fruits and vegetables are longevity foods. They deliver fiber, potassium, magnesium, and an enormous range of bioactive compounds, vitamin C, carotenoids, polyphenols, flavonols that regulate inflammation and oxidative stress, 2 core drivers of aging. Some studies suggest the greater risk of reduction occurs around 8 to 10 servings per day. Eat the spectrum. Leafy greens, vegetables, orange, red produce, mushrooms, berries, eat all different kinds. And let's talk about juice for a second. Most people, and especially kids, fruit juice should never be food. That's liquid sugar with the fiber removed. Whole fruit is not the problem. Processing fruit into a sugar delivery system is. Added sugars and the fake sugar trap. This might be the strongest part of the entire document. The guidelines state no amount of added sugar is recommended as part of a healthy diet. They go further. Children under 4 should consume zero added sugar. No sugar meal should contain more than 10, no single meal should contain more than 10 grams of added sugar. They specifically call out sugar sweetened beverages and cite associations with increased risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, depression, dental disease, and all-cause mortality. My take is simple. If you want the highest return on investment, nutrient change, stop drinking sugar. Liquid sugar delivers a massive metabolic hit with no satiety, no nutritional upside. It accelerates glycation, worsens insulin resistance, and even shows association with brain changes in memory-related regions. I also love that the guidelines didn't blindly endorse artificial sweeteners. Replacing sugar with chemicals isn't a free win. Those compounds can influence gut bacteria, appetite regulation, and glucose responses. Some sugar alcohols are even raising red flags in cardiovascular research. If you're choosing a least bad option, something like stevia or monk fruit makes more sense than a daily habit of artificial sweetener cocktails. And fat finally gets some context here. The guidelines moved away from demonizing saturated fat, instead emphasizing fat quality and food context. They explicitly state that fat-full dairy can fit into a healthy diet, emphasizing olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, omega-3 rich seafoods, and acknowledge that butter and beef tallow can have a place. They still keep saturated fat under 10% of calories, but they push back against the idea that it must be driven as low as possible at all costs. I support this shift with nuances. Saturated fat isn't inherently toxic, but it's also not irrelevant. Different saturated fats behave differently, and the food matrix matters. Cheese behaves differently from butter. Fermented dairy behaves differently from isolated fat. My stance is straightforward. Make olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, and fatty fish your base fats. Let saturated fat be present, not dominant. Avoid deep fried foods, ultra processed foods soaked in industrial oils. Fat isn't just energy. It helps absorb fat soluble vitamins and makes vegetables more nutritious, not less. Ultra processed foods are the core problem. For the first time, the guidelines say it out loud: avoid ultra processed foods. These foods now make up nearly 2/3 of calories Americans' diet. This isn't observational data. Randomized trials show people eat hundreds more calories per day and gain weight when given ultra-processed foods, even when macros are matched. Ultra-processed foods are engineered for overconsumption. They disrupt gut health. They increase chemical exposure. They undermine metabolic regulation. They should be rare, not daily. The default diet should be meals made from recognizable ingredients. That's the heart of these guidelines. Omega-3s need clearer targets. The guidelines encourage omega-3 rich seafood and note that Americans average only about 110 milligrams per day of EPA and DHA. That's an admission of underdosing. I prefer clearer targets, either 1 to 1.5 grams per day of EPA plus DHA, or a biomarker goal like an omega-3 index above 5%. Flaxseed and chia seeds are fine, but they don't reliably convert into DHA, readily ability convert into DHA. Perform omega-3s matter. Pregnancy, lactation, and non-negotiables. The guideline emphasizes pregnancy and breastfeeding nutrition, and rightly so. I'd go even stronger on fewer nutrients. Folate for natural tube development, chlorine for unsung hero of fetal brain development, eggs matter here, DHA, a structural compound of the developing brain, iron to support mineral energy, and fat stores, iodine, critical for thyroid and brain development. Nutrition during pregnancy and lactation doesn't just affect mom, it programs the child. So, my final thoughts. For the first time in years, these guidelines feel closer to biologically reality. The big winner is clear. Been saying this for a long time, didn't need guidelines for this. Eat real food, prioritize protein. Dramatically reduce ultra processed foods. Stop drinking sugar. Focus on nutrient density across the lifespan. Have your fruits and vegetables. Let's go. If Americans follow just those principles, we'd see less diabetes, less obesity, fewer cardiovascular events, better brain health, and healthier aging. Guidelines don't change health. Implementation does. The food environment still makes the unhealthy choices the easy choice. But this is a step in the right direction. And for the first time in a long time, I'm curiously optimistic. So I hope this helps you break down these new guidelines. It's kind of the same things we've been talking about for a long time here in the Functional Longevity Podcast. Eat foods at the real state. We all know what foods are good foods are. Because the problem is we're lazy and it's easy to just grab the foods that we grab. But make a concerted effort to change your nutrition. You will feel better and you will live a longer, healthier life. Well, that's all I got for you today. I look forward to being back here again next week with more information on how to get fit, feel younger, live better.